Hello there, you perfectly lovely little muggles. My name is Sarah, and this evening I'm reading from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K Rowling. We're on the second part of the chapter, The Sorting Hat. When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted, "Gryffindor!" Neville ran off, still wearing it, and had to jog back amongst gales of laughter to give it to McDougal Morag. Malfoy swaggered forward when his name was called and got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, "Slytherin!" Malfoy went to join his friends, Crabbe and Goyle, looking very pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Moon, Not, Parkinson, then a pair of twin girls, Patil and Patil, then Perks, Sally Ann, and then at last, Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hissing fires all over the hall. Potter, did they say? The Harry Potter. The last thing that Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent. Oh, my goodness, yes. And a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now, that is interesting. Where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edge of the stool and he thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, eh? Said the small voice. Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on your way to greatness. No doubt about that. No, well, if you're sure, it had better be Gryffindor. Harry heard the shout and the last words to the whole hall. He took off his hat and he walked shakily towards the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put in Slytherin, he hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. Percy the prefect got up and shook his hand vigorously, while the Weasley twins yelled, "We've got Potter! We've got Potter!" Harry sat opposite the ghost in the ruff he'd seen earlier, and the ghost patted his arm, giving Harry a sudden, horrible feeling that he'd just been plunged into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eye and gave him the thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there, in the centre of the high table, in the large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognised him at once from the card that he'd got out of the chocolate frog on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the whole hall that shone as brightly as the ghost's. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell too, the nervous young man from the leaky cauldron. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And now there were only 3 people left to be sorted. Turpin Lisa became a Ravenclaw, and then it was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers under the table, and a second later the hat shouted, "Gryffindor!" Harry clapped loudly, and with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. "Well done, Ron! Excellent!" said Percy Weasley pompously across Harry as Zabini Blaze was made a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty gold plate. He had only just realised how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasties seemed ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had got to his feet. He was beaming at the students, his arms opened wide as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all here. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak." "Thank you." He sat back down, everyone clapped and cheered, and Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. "Is he a bit mad?" he asked Percy uncertainly. "Mad?" said Percy airily. "He is a genius. Best wizard in the world. But he's a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry? Harry's mouth fell open. The dish in front of him was now piled with food. He'd never seen so many things he liked to eat on one table. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, bacon and steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, chips, Yorkshire puddings, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and for some strange reason, mint humbugs. The Dursleys had never exactly starved Harry, but he'd never been allowed to eat as much as he liked. Dudley had always taken anything that Harry really wanted, even if it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a bit of everything except the humbugs, and he began to eat. It was all delicious. That does look good, said the ghost in the ruff sadly, watching Harry cut up his steak. Can't you? I haven't eaten for nearly 400 years, said the ghost. I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I don't think I've introduced myself. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porkington, at your service, resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower. I know who you are, said Ron suddenly. My brother's told me about you. You're nearly headless Nick. I would prefer if you called me Sir Nicholas de Mimsy. The ghost barely stifled, but sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted. Nearly headless? How can you be nearly headless? Sir Nicholas looked extremely miffed, as if their little chat wasn't going all the way that he wanted. Like this, he said irritably. He seized his left ear, and as he pulled, his whole head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as if it was on a hinge. Somebody had obviously tried to behead him, but had not done it properly. Looking pleased at the stunned looks on their faces, nearly headless Nick flipped his head back onto his neck, coughed, and said, So, new Gryffindors, I hope you're going to help us win the house championship this year. Gryffindor have never gone so long without winning. Slytherin have got the cup 6 years in a row. The bloody Baron's becoming almost unbearable. He's the Slytherin ghost. Harry looked over at the Slytherin table and saw a horrible ghost sitting there with blank staring eyes, a gaunt face and robes stained with silver blood. He was right next to Malfoy, who, Harry was pleased to see, didn't look too pleased with the seating arrangements. How did he get covered in blood? Asked Seamus with great interest. I have never asked, said nearly headless Nick delicately. When everyone had eaten as much as they could, the remains of the food faded from the plates, leaving them sparkling clean as before. A moment later, the puddings appeared, blocks of ice cream in every flavour. Apple pies, treacle tarts, chocolate eclairs, jam donuts, trifles, strawberries, jelly, rice puddings. Was Harry helped himself to a treacle tart. The talk turned to their families. I'm half and half, said Seamus. My dad's a muggle. Mum didn't tell him that she was a witch until after they were married. Bit of a nasty shock for him. The others laughed. What about you, Neville? Said Ron. Well, my gran brought me up and she was a witch, said Neville. But the family thought I was all muggle for ages. My great-uncle Algie kept trying to catch me off my guard and force some magic out of me. He pushed me off the end of Blackpool Pier once. I nearly drowned, but nothing happened until I was 8. Great-uncle Algie came round for tea and he was hanging me out of an upstairs window by the ankles when my great-auntie Enid offered him a meringue and he accidentally let go. But I bounced all the way down the garden and into the road. They were all really pleased. Gran was crying. She was so happy. And should have seen their faces when I got in there. They thought I might not be magic enough to come, you see. Great-aunt Algie was so pleased that he bought me my toad. On Harry's other side, Percy Weasley and Hermione were talking about lessons. I do hope that they start straight away, so there's so much to learn. I'm particularly interested in transfiguration, turning something into something else. Of course, it's supposed to be very difficult. You'll be starting small, just matches into needles, that sort of thing. Harry, who was starting to feel warm and sleepy, looked up at the high table again. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblet. Professor McGonagall was talking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quirrell, in his absurd turban, was talking to a teacher with greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and sallow skin. It happened very quickly. The hooked-nosed teacher looked past Quirrell's turban straight into Harry's eyes. And a sharp, hot pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead. Ow! Harry clapped his hand to his head. What is it? Said Percy. Nothing. The pain had gone as quickly as it had come. Harder to shake off was the feeling that Harry had got from the teacher's look, a feeling that he didn't like Harry at all. Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell? He asked Percy. Oh, you know Quirrell already, do you? No wonder he's looking so nervous. That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions, but he doesn't want to. Everyone knows he's after Quirrell's job. Knows an awful lot about the dark arts, does Snape. Harry watched Snape for a while, but Snape didn't look at him again. At last the puddings too disappeared and Professor Dumbledore got to his feet again. The hall fell silent. Ahem! Just a few more words now we're all fed and watered. I have a start of term notice to give to you. First years should note that the forest in the ground is forbidden to all pupils, and a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well. Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the direction of the Weasley twins. I have also been asked by Mr. Filch, the caretaker, to remind you that no magic should be used between classes in the corridor. Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of term, and anyone interested in playing for their house teams should contact Madam Hooch. And finally, I must tell you that this year, the second floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death. Harry laughed, but he was one of the few who did. He's not serious, he muttered to Percy. Must be, said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. It's odd because he usually gives us a reason why we're not allowed to go somewhere. The forest is full of dangerous beasts, everyone knows that. I do think he might have told us prefects at least. And now, before you go to bed, let us sing the school song, cried Dumbledore. Harry noticed that all the other teachers' smiles had become rather fixed. Dumbledore gave his wand a little flick, as if he was trying to get a fly off the end of it, and a long golden ribbon flew out of it, which rose high above the tables and twisted its snake-like self into words. Everyone pick their favourite tune, said Dumbledore, and off we go. The school bellowed, Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy-Worty, Hogwarts, teach us something, please. Whether we be old and bald or young with scabby knees, our heads could do some filling with some interesting stuff. For now they're bare and full of air, dyed flies and bits of fluff. So teach us things worth knowing, bring back what we've forgot. Just do your best, we'll do the rest, and learn until our brains all rot. Everyone finished the song at different times. At last, only the Weasley twins were left singing along to a very slow funeral march. Dumbledore conducted their last few lines with his wand, and when they'd finished, he was one of those who clapped the loudest. Ah, music, he said, wiping his eyes. A magic beyond all we do here. And now, bedtime. Off you go. The Gryffindor's first years followed Percy through the chattering crowds, out to the great hall and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs were like lead again, but only because he was so tired and full of food. He was too sleepy even to be surprised that the people in the portraits along the corridors whispered and pointed as they passed, or that twice Percy led them through doorways hidden behind sliding panels and hanging tapestries. They climbed more staircases, yawning and dragging their feet, and Harry was just wondering how much further they had to go when they came to a sudden halt. A bundle of walking sticks was floating in midair above them, and as Percy took a step towards them, they started throwing themselves at him. Peeves, Percy whispered to the first years. A poltergeist. He raised his voice. Peeves, show yourself. A loud, rude sound, like the air being let out of a balloon, answered. Do you want me to go to the Bloody Baron? There was and a little man in a wicked dark eyes and a wide mouth appeared, floating cross-legged in the air, clutching the walking sticks. Ooh, he said with an evil cackle. Echo firsties, what fun! He swooped suddenly at them and they all duck. Go away, Peeves, or the Baron will hear about this. I mean it, barked Percy. Peeves stuck out his tongue and vanished, dropping the walking sticks on Neville's head. He heard them zooming away, rattling coats of armour as he passed. You want to watch out for Peeves, said Percy as they set off again. The bloody Baron's the only one who can control him. He won't even listen to us prefects, and here we are. At the very end of the corridor hung a portrait of a very fat woman in a pink silk dress. Password, she said. Caput Draconis, said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it. Neville needed a leg up and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cosy room full of squashy armchairs. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitory and the boys through another. At the top of the spiral staircase, they were obviously in one of the towers. They found their beds at last. 5 four-poster, hung with deep red velvet curtains. The trunks had already been brought up. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pyjamas and they fell into bed. Great food, isn't it? Ron muttered to Harry through the hangings. Get off, Scabbers! It's chewing my sheets. Harry was going to ask Ron if he'd had any of the treacle tart, but he fell asleep almost at once. Perhaps Harry had eaten a bit too much, because he had a very strange dream. He was wearing Professor Quirrell's turban, which kept talking to him, telling him that he must transfer to Slytherin at once, because it was his destiny. Harry told the turban they didn't want to be in Slytherin. It got heavier and heavier. It tried to pull it off, but it tightened painfully. And there was Malfoy, laughing at him as he struggled with it. Then Malfoy turned into a hook-nosed teacher Snape, whose laugh became high and cold. There was a burst of green light, and Harry woke, sweating and shaking. He rolled over, fell asleep again. And when we woke up the next day, he didn't remember the dream at all. Right, getting exciting. Again! So, clean your teeth, wash your hands, lots of times, and then snuggle down into bed and give yourself a great big gigantic cuddle, because tomorrow I'll be reading The Potions Master. Night-night.